Hi, and welcome to the next part of my implementation of CS50 Finance. Today, we're going to work on the sell page. It is very similar to the buy page, but instead, the action is different and we're going to subtract the amount of shares instead of adding them, and therefore gain money instead of losing. Let's read what we have to do. Complete the implementation of sell in such a way that it enables the user to sell shares of a stock that he or she owns. We require that the user inputs a stock symbol implemented as a select menu whose name is symbol. Render an apology if the user fails to select a stock or if somehow once submitted the user does not own any shares of that stock. Require that the user input a number of shares implemented as a text field whose name is shares. Render an apology if the input is not a positive integer or if the user does not own that many shares of the stock. Submit the user's input via post to sell. When a sale is complete, redirect the user back to the index page. You don't need to worry about race conditions or use transactions. Okay, so let's first go here. This is our sell function. Let me remove return apology to do and start implementing this page. So the first thing we want to do, just as always, is we want to check if our method is get or post. I'm not going to explain that again, since I have already done that a couple of times. If you don't understand why we're doing that, you can go back to one of my previous videos where I explained that in detail. Now, let's start implementing it. So, if the request method equals post, we just want to pass for now because post is almost always the more complicated method, but else if it is get, what we want to do is we want to obtain all of the symbols and add them to a select menu. And you can actually see those here in the original staff solution. Since we haven't bought anything yet, we only see symbol. But if we buy 2 shares of Apple products and we go to sell, we can now see our Apple symbol. And if we buy 1 share of, say, Tesla, I'm not sure if this was the symbol, but I hope so, 1 share, we go here. When we click, we can see these 2 symbols. So the only thing we need here is the symbol. And how can we obtain them? We can say symbols equal db execute. Now we're going to obtain them from our transactions table. So we want to select the symbol, obviously, from which table? Well, transactions, because that's where we have entered all of the symbols we have bought, or more accurately, the symbols of the products we have bought. So from transactions, where the user ID equals question mark for now. And now we want to group them by the symbol, right? Because if we don't, and we have bought a couple of shares of Apple, then some Tesla products, and then some Apple once again, we're going to get a menu with 2 Apple options, which are basically the same. That's why we're grouping them, because we want all of the Apple transactions to go into one symbol, all of the Tesla ones into another, etc. And here, we're going to enter our user ID. Again, we're doing this thing in order to prevent from SQL injection. Once we've done that, we can just render our template, our cell template, which we're going to create now. So let's say return render template, and here we want to pass cell HTML. This is what our file is going to be called. And here we want to pass in the symbols that we have obtained from our database, from our transactions table. So we can say symbols equals symbols. Again, recall that these don't have to match. You can call this one whatever you want. Alright, now let's go ahead and implement our cell HTML. New file, cell HTML. Alright, let me just copy one of the one of the templates, and here we are going to say cell. Actually, we do need a form here, so I'm not going to remove that. I will just replace login with cell. Here we're going to say cell, and let's now go back here and check how many fields we are going to need. So we need one for the symbol, even though it's not going to be a text input field, it's going to be a select menu, but we're still going to select a certain symbol, and one for the share, so 2 of them. Inside of here, I'm going to remove this input because we're not going to use the input tag for that, but instead we're going to have a select tag, so select. And here we want to say name equals symbol. Now this comes from here because they've set whose name is symbol. That's what we're doing. And inside of here, since we have all the symbols passed from here, so this is basically going to be a list. What we want to do is we want to iterate through all of the symbols and for each one add an option. So what we can do is we can use the Jinja syntax in order to use a for loop. Let's go and do that. For symbol in symbols. So for each one, let me just add my and for in order to not forget it later. And now what we want to do is we want to say add an option tag where we are going to insert symbol of symbol, and I'm going to explain why I'm doing that in a second. So recall that whenever we have our list, the list contains dictionaries with keys and values, and in this case, since we have only obtained the symbols from here, select symbol, we're going to have a list with some dictionaries with all the symbols, and each dictionary is going to have one key, which is symbol, and one value, which could be either Apple or Tesla or something else. And what we want to do is we want to, for each symbol dictionary, get the value of the symbol key inside of it. Oops. Okay, there we go. That's why we're doing that. Okay, so that should be our template, like the first part of our template. We have a select menu, and for each symbol dictionary, now this is a dictionary, we want to take the value of the symbol and add it as an option to our select menu. Now the other one should be pretty simple. We've already done that. It is just going to be an input field with the number of shares. We go here, just replace that with shares. This is going to be shares as well. And the type is going to be a number. This seems reasonable. Now let's go here, log in, and just try to render the template in order to ensure that everything is fine. Okay, so, oops, we have an internal server error. Let's check what's going on. User ID is not defined. Oh, well, yeah. We actually inserted our user ID, but we didn't take it from our session. So let's quickly fix that. So user ID equals session of user ID. I'm not going to explain that because before I did that a couple of times. I just forgot to do it here. Okay, let's try that again. So, username, password. So, and yeah, now we've got Apple and Tesla because last time we bought a couple of products. Now, we could do this symbol thing here, but now I'm doing the basic stuff. In the last part of the tutorial, we're going to add the flashes, and we're just going to optimize a couple of things. For now, we just want to get a functionality. Now, let's go on to the post one. It is slightly harder, but not something you haven't seen yet. It is similar to the buy one. So again, in order not to forget that, we want to obtain the user ID. By the way, since we're writing it twice, we can just take it out and put it here in the beginning of the function. But just in order to make it more coherent for you, I'm going to do it twice. user ID, but usually you should avoid such redundancies. Okay, and now what does the post method mean? Well, it means that we have already chosen our symbol. We have written the amount of shares we would like to have, and what we want to do is we just want to obtain those values. We want to see how many shares we have chosen to sell and which product, which symbol we have chosen. So the way we do that is we write symbol equals request form get symbol, because that's what the name of the field is. And then we want to say shares equals, and now since there should be a number, it should be an integer, we want to use int of request form get shares. Alright, let's go back here and read what we should do. So, render an apology if the input is not a positive integer or if the user does not own that many shares of the stock. So how can we check if the shares are a negative number, or more accurately if they're not a positive one, because 0 is not a positive number either. So we can do if shares are less than or equal to 0, we want to return an apology saying, for instance, shares must be a positive number. Or, yeah, a positive number sounds better to the user than a positive integer, because most users don't know exactly what's an integer. So after that, we would like to check the price and the name of our stock, because we already have our symbol, the shares, and I want to get some other info that we're going to paste into transactions, because we need that. We need to fill in every field in transactions. So let's say item price equals lookup with this symbol and take the price. Then we want to say item name equals lookup again, symbol, and we want the name. Actually, let me use double quotes just for consistency. Alright, first what we would like to do is check what number of shares the user already owns. Because imagine that I own 2 shares of Apple products and I try to sell 4. I cannot do that, right? And in this case, I believe we had to render an apology. Let me just check that. Yeah, or if the user does not own that many shares of the stock. So, how can we check our current number of shares? We can obtain this information from our transactions table. So, let's say current shares or shares owned, I think that's better, shares owned equals db execute. Select shares from transactions where user ID equals a question mark for now. Let me go down a bit. And symbol equals a question mark. And then we want to group them by the symbol again. Now, we're doing that in order to take all of our Apple shares and all of our Tesla shares, not all of the transactions separately. And if we have chosen Apple, we want to see what our Apple shares are. And that's why we are taking the user ID and the symbol. I want to check how many shares of Apple, for instance, does user number 3 have, for example. And now we just want to pass the arguments. Now, on the first question mark, we're going to have the user ID, obviously. So, user ID. And then we would like to have our symbol, which we have obtained up here. There we go. Symbol equals request form get symbol. And again, since we know that this is going to return a list with dictionaries, In this case, it's going to be one dictionary. We want to only get the value of the cache key, so we're going to say 0 in order to get the first dictionary, which is only going to be one actually. And then we want to see the value of the shares key. And now we want to say if shares owned is less than the shares we would like to buy now, like less than the thing we have entered here, we want to return an apology saying you don't have enough shares. Okay, we would like to update the cache of our user if he has successfully sold the certain product. The first thing we would need is the current cache of the user. So let's say current cache equals db execute. Select cache from users, because that's the table where we have information about the cache of the user, from users, where id equals question mark, and after our question mark we want to add the user id, which we have already taken, and again, since this is a list of dictionary, we want to say index of 0 and then the value of cache. Okay, once we have that, we can go on and update our user's cache. So db execute update users, because we want to update this table, and set our cache equal to a question mark for now, where the id equals a question mark again. And now we want to say, now what is the new cache going to be? It is going to be the previous one, like the current cache, plus the total amount that we have obtained from selling those products. Now, how can we find this total amount? Well, we can set up a new variable up here maybe. Only price, let's say, is going to equal the shares we are going to sell times the item price. And here we can say this is going to equal current cache plus the price. For instance, if we have $2,000 and we have sold something for 1,000, now we want to say to have 2,000 plus 1,000, which is 3,000. For the ID, again, we want to enter our user ID. The last thing we would like to do is enter these transactions into our transactions table in order to have all the information stored there. So we can do, let me just go down and maybe a little to the left and say db execute. We're going to insert new information into our transactions table. So insert into transactions. And now what do we want to insert? We're going to insert the user ID, the name of the product, the shares, the price, the type, and the symbol. And now what are our values going to be? So values. And we're going to put some question marks for now, so 6 of them again, right? Yeah. 1, 2. Okay. And now outside of our quote, we're going to paste our user ID. It's better to write them here, so user ID. Now our name, then item name. And here something specific that we have to take into consideration is the fact that we are actually selling something, which means that we are losing a certain amount of this product, a certain count. So since we're selling it and we don't have it, we don't own it anymore, we want to say minus shares. And now why are we doing that? Because if we had 6 shares of Apple and we sell 2, we want to enter minus 2 into our database, and then when we group them and when we find the sum, we'll have 6 plus minus 2 if I have sold 2 of them, which is going to be 4. Then the item price, the type. Now the type is always going to be share. The type is always going to be sell, since since we're inside of this function, so cell, and then the symbol. This seems fine, and in the end, after doing all of this, we want to redirect to our main page. Now, let's try to do that. Let me first go to, oops, we got an internal server error. We have a syntax. Yeah, because we have missed the comma here. Okay, let me stop that and Flask run again. So, why? Okay, so we have 6 Apple shares, so we're going to try to sell 2 of them. Apple to sell. Okay, and now we can see that in index HTML, we now have 4 shares. Why? Because if we go back here into our index page, index function, where is it? Oh, there we go. We are going to transactions. We are grouping everything by symbol and we're finding the sum. And since in by we have written 6 shares, and now in our sell function we wrote -2. We have 6 plus -2, which is 6 minus 2. Therefore, we have 4 here. That's a really cool thing that we did. And the price and total price is correct as well. So that was everything for today's video. I hope it has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comments or on any other social media. Thank you for watching, and next time we're going to work on our history page.